President Bashar al-Assad has claimed victory over the rebels several times over the last 8 years of civil war, but the turmoil in the region seems to be ongoing. So what exactly would victory look like in the war-torn country? Is there really an end in sight? Well, a group of New York Times journalists, they went to 5 government-held cities in June to find out. And we should note, they were completely accompanied by government-appointed miners on their 8-day trip. New York Times reporter Vivian Yee was one of the journalists in Syria. She joins me now from Beirut. Vivian, thank you so much for joining us. You know, it's been 8 years of war there now. What does the country look like 8 years later?
Thank you. Well, it's sort of a tale of two distinct appearances at the moment. You've got government-held areas in which things look relatively normal. Life is going on as usual. People are shopping, going about their lives. There's little physical damage, although people have been traumatized as well, of course. And then you go to a place like Douma, which is a Damascus suburb, or eastern Aleppo, which was the rebel-held half of Aleppo city, and things are just totally shattered, pulverized. And even there, people are starting to pick pieces and go about their lives as well, but the physical damage is just stunning there.
We're looking at those pulverized images of the streets and the towns there in Syria. As I mentioned before, President Assad has claimed victory several times. You talked to the people in Syria. Was that the sense that they were giving you?
Well, the people we spoke to tried to stay away from politics generally. They were focused on basic survival. They were focused on getting doors and windows back to their houses. They were focused on making enough money to buy fruit and vegetables, to say nothing of meat, at the end of the day. So also keep in mind, we were followed around by government escorts and minders the entire time, so it could very well be that people had political opinions and didn't feel free to express them. But in general, it's a lot of survival, resilience, and people trying to move past the traumas that did happen to them during the war, like losing many members of their families either to the bombs and the shells, or to government prisons where they still might be held without any information about them.
You know, the United Nations estimates 8 out of 10 Syrians are living in poverty. I know it's really hard when you have a government minder to sort of get the authentic sense from the people on the ground, but what is it like where the economy there is shattered and people are just trying to survive?
Well, you'll hear a lot of people blaming their hardships on government sanctions, American sanctions on the government, which is certainly the line that the government is pushing. Of course, it's a lot more complicated than that. Syria has just been through a devastating civil war. Its infrastructure and its cities are battered. There's no way this country is going to come back anytime soon without a huge infusion of donor support, and that's not forthcoming. So in the meantime, people are really, really struggling. This is a country where meat is a staple of the diet, as it is in many countries, and people have stopped going to the butcher. They can barely afford vegetables. Many of them are in debt. And so think about, you've got a family where the breadwinner, the husband and the father is perhaps dead, perhaps gone, perhaps in prison. And that means you've got a single mom who now has to raise several children and maybe is starting to work for the first time in her life. That was a story we heard over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's amazing how in so many war-torn regions, it's the women that end up carrying the economy, the family, the society, just by default. We've seen a lot of ISIS activity recently. What are your thoughts on that? And are Syrians saying, what are they saying about the threat?
Well, ISIS has lost its physical territory in eastern Syria, but of course there are still attacks quite often. And so analysts believe that they're sort of spread out throughout the country in isolated cells. And recently a Pentagon report has said that a displaced person camp in northeast Syria, where a lot of wives and children of ISIS fighters are being held, that is sort of a ripe target for re-radicalization and recruitment of children who are growing up or women who are still radical there, simply because the conditions there are so awful, so miserable, that these children don't have services, and so they may be growing up into a situation where they may be ripe for exploitation.
Vivian Yee, I want to thank you very much for your reporting from out of Syria.
Thank you.